Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sierra Hignite. Phil Sanchez will join us in just a moment. We start this morning with a U.S. Supreme Court throwing out that Texas lawsuit looking to overturn the results of the presidential election. The suit dismissed Friday night without even a hearing, but not before several leading Indiana Republicans expressed support in court. Let's show you the list from Congress. Representatives Jim Banks, Jim Baird, Trey Hollingsworth, Greg Pence, and Jackie Walorski. Also on that list, current Attorney General Curtis Hill and Attorney General-elect Todd Rokita. Our own Brooke Martin spoke one-on-one with Rokita just before the decision was announced.
All right, we welcome in Attorney General-elect Todd Rokita. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, you bet.
I want to start with how you're feeling. You tested positive for coronavirus shortly after the election.
It was on election day, actually.
Election day.
Yeah. So, but we made it through the finish line, and great to be back. And thanks for everyone's outpouring of support. It was really humbling and warmly felt at the same time. So
you feeling better now?
Even those that didn't vote for me, I appreciate that. I am. I'm feeling great.
Good.
Yeah, ready to go at it. The transition team is in place, and we're working on hires for the new administration at the Attorney General's office, and we're already doing the work, some of the work of the Attorney General's office in terms of planning and what our priorities are going to be. So we're looking forward to that.
Good, good. I want to change gears for a second and talk about the big story today. You want the U.S. Supreme Court to immediately hear Texas's lawsuit that could potentially overturn the election results. Talk to us about that and why you want that.
Well, you know, I speak not only as the Attorney General-elect, but also as a voter and also as Indiana's former Chief Election Officer. And so it's very important that we get this right so that voters and taxpayers have the confidence they need in order to participate in their republic. And there's nothing more foundational than the right to vote. And the fact of the matter is, Indiana was negatively impacted by the actions of non-legislative actors in these other states. The Constitution, our U.S. Constitution, is very clear that only the legislatures can set election laws. That wasn't done in 4 states. Whether they were unelected bureaucrats, judges, or even other state officers like secretaries of state who were not the legislature went in and changed the laws at the last minute. Might have been well intended, we don't know. But the fact of the matter is it was unconstitutional, and as a result, votes that shouldn't have been counted were. And perhaps votes that weren't counted should have been. And so we need to really have the Supreme Court set this straight to make sure we have an accurate count, an accurate result, and that we can have confidence in our procedures.
Would you call this election fraud? I mean, would you put that under that umbrella?
There's certainly evidence of fraud. I think fraud goes to intent. And it's really hard at this point to read the minds and hearts of the people that were those non-legislative actors. But we have to dig into that a little more. But the fact of the matter is that in a lot of ways, we don't even have to go there. It was unconstitutional. And the Constitution is there for a reason. We're either going to be people that follow the law, follow the Constitution, or we're going to be people that are ruled by unelected bureaucrats and judges. And it should be the former, not the latter.
Do you believe that Donald Trump won this election?
It's hard to say. You know, it really is. I'm certainly a supporter of Donald Trump, so I want that out there. But again, as a chief election officer, former chief election officer, and as an attorney and as an Indiana Attorney General, we have to know that our processes work, and right now, we just don't.
So, I mean, at what point would you believe that the election results are final?
When every valid vote is counted, and every invalid vote is thrown out.
Okay, and that's a hard road because judges have already.
It's hard in the sense that there hasn't been a perfect. You're right. In terms of this, there hasn't been a perfect election since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
Right, because we're human.
Right.
And by biblical definition of the word, we're going to make honest mistakes. But when those mistakes happen, they have to be fair. That means they have to apply to all of us equally, just like the law has to apply to all of us equally. And inside those 4 states, some counties, Democrat-leaning ones, voters were able to cure their ballots hours, days after the election. Others, presumably in Republican counties, who followed the law weren't. And so it was unfair. The law was unfairly applied. That's the whole point.
Is it a dangerous precedent to have one state challenge another state's laws?
No, it happens.
Okay.
It happens. In fact, our founders knew it was going to happen. And so that's why they specifically put in our Constitution the fact that when that happens, when there's a controversy between states, you automatically go to the Supreme Court. It's called original jurisdiction. The Supreme Court takes up the case. Doesn't have to go to a trial court, doesn't have to go to other lower courts, right to the Supreme Court.
Okay. I want to go back to coronavirus for a little bit because Indiana is expected to receive the vaccine this month. I want to talk about Indiana law. I think there's some confusion regarding, can an employer mandate employees to get the vaccine?
Well, it's a great question, and one we are actually dealing with in my day job at Apex Benefits, where we have several clients that are wondering the same thing. There is federal regulatory guidance when it comes to flu shots and that kind of thing, but not really with regard to this kind of vaccine or this kind of situation where it's involved in a pandemic. So I think we're going to find the federal agencies involved, Department of Labor and others, come out with guidance for us on that. Right now, it's an open question, and certainly if the General Assembly takes up the issue, I will advise them as their Attorney General and defend that law, under our Constitution.
I want to end with, if you're going to ask lawmakers come January to change the governor's emergency powers.
I think that our emergency declaration law has to be updated for pandemics like this. When the law was written shortly after 9/11, it was for tornadoes, terrorist attacks, shorter things, not something that's gone on for a year, maybe longer. And the fact of the matter is, under our federal and state constitutions, the branch of government closest to the people is the legislative branch. Therefore, they, at the very least, need to be brought in a lot earlier to own the decision of what to do. That's accountability. It shouldn't be left to one person. In fact, I think our governor would want something like that, because then you could share the leadership. And that's hard leadership. He did a great job under very difficult circumstances. I'd like to see the General Assembly own some of that. I'm going like this because I want to say fan out around the state and help educate Hoosiers. We pride ourselves on common sense, and I truly believe if we used it after we were educated about, hey, this is why a mask is important, this is when it's needed, this is when it's not, hey, grandma needs to really be looked after in terms of how she's interacting and who's interacting with her, and does she have a mask, and all the things. We'd be much better off, and we wouldn't even call it a mandate. We'd just call it government educating folks, then allowing us as individuals to use our common sense.
So as far as statewide mask mandate for 2021, no.
I don't think it's necessary. I'm not the governor. I would certainly make sure as Attorney General that all the other legal options are on the table.
Okay. Attorney General-elect Todd Rokita, thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you.
Coming up, Democrats staring at a long road ahead to regain standing inside the Indiana State House. We talked to one former lawmaker hoping to lead that charge next on All Indiana Politics. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics. Let's look ahead to early next year when Indiana Democrats will have to choose a new leader. John Zodi, who has been party chair for more than 6 years, plans to leave that post. And among the publicly declared candidates is Carly Macer, who just finished serving 8 years in the Indiana House of Representatives. Our Alexis Rogers is with her.
Carly, it's nice to meet you virtually here. You're running to be the next chair of the Indiana Democratic Party. So what's the current state of the Democrats here in Indiana?
Well, I think it's really obvious we're at a critical juncture at this time here in the state of Indiana for Democrats. And certainly for the past decade, our state house has been dominated by a supermajority that has radically imposed destructive policies that have harmed Hoosier families and really eroded the idea of a fair playing field altogether. I know in the past 2 election cycles alone, Democrats have suffered major defeats while Republicans continue to build up that institutional power, growing even more emboldened. And it just allows them to continue to pass legislation that harms working class and marginalized Hoosiers. And I think for us, we are entering, a critical time for our party. Maybe one of the most critical times. As Republicans prepare to redraw the district lines, we know that our party is already at a disadvantage. Now more than ever, we need to act with a sense of urgency to rebuild the momentum and that has been lost along the way, and not only win seats at the federal level and at the top of the ticket, but to take the majority in the state House and elect Democrats to local offices, and so that we can pass policies that work for Hoosiers. I mean, that is that's it. I mean, we've got so much work to do, and none of us are denying the disadvantage that we're in today.
And when it comes to some of those pretty tough elections, those tough races, the party just suffered one of its worst defeats in a gubernatorial campaign. How do you turn that around heading towards 2024?
Yeah. Well, again, it comes down to, we know we need to have incredible candidates. But most importantly, the fundraising piece. It is a huge part of any of the top tickets that we're working on. And just knowing that Democrats have fallen short in that area, we recognize that. But also, the messaging that we face, that we must continue to walk through. There's a layered and layered and layered approach about how we do that. But it's a combination also of, we've got to have more voter engagement. We've got to have certainly benchmarks to be able to not only get to, but to exceed, a lot of accountability, but taking this full responsibility.
You've talked a lot about your key message for the party, but also what do you want to see out of Democratic lawmakers when the General Assembly meets next month?
Well, I got to tell you this year, as somebody who has just fresh out of this seat, just cleaned my office a few weeks ago, really. There is just a completely different time of what we're going to be dealing with. Looking ahead, we know that COVID has made impacts on a variety of things, and there is a lot that we must pay attention to. Most importantly, we've got to make sure that we focus on the lives of the people in this state and that they have all the tools and resources that they need at this time. We need to look at what we're doing for our business communities and certainly all of the small businesses and the work that is being put into, just making sure we're doing everything we can and above to be able to support our communities to get to be able to move forward. Certainly, I would also add, are we ever going to pay teachers? I know it's a critical time, but teacher pay, but just focusing on public education and it being eroded, certainly the environment, but the racial injustices that we faced as well, across the state and nation over this past year. I think there's a variety of things, and I look forward to the governor and my friends across the aisle to step up on these policies, as well as I do expect in the House and the Senate, for them to stay focused on the working families, and our policies all surround making sure that people have the tools and resources to take responsibility.
Before I let you go, you talked a lot about how you feel like your party can build up from the ground level and the community level, the folks that are involved with that, but also what do you want to see out of new Democratic candidates with all of those things in mind?
Yeah. What do I want to see in new Democrat candidates? I want to see them have the look in their eye that they know that not only are they out there working because they believe in the policies that they stand for, but that they also know that there is a plan moving forward for them to not only do the work across the aisle, stand up for what they believe in, but also to know that their policies are going to be in place. I want to make sure that moving forward, that anytime Democrats are weary, that they know that there is a plan for us moving forward, that we cannot just continue to throw darts and expect things to stick on occasion. But I am looking forward to sharing mentorship with our candidates, but also being there, being available for the support, the resources, the tools, and just to see Democrats on the stage, the excellence, the hard work, and of course the policies that we stand for. But I'm extremely excited to lift up and stand alongside everyone as we move forward together. And it is really, truly with excitement that I get to see us all working together. But I believe that action speaks so much louder than words. And I look forward to the day that we get to see a lot more of that for Democrats across the state.
Carly Macer, thank you so much for joining us.
Ladies, thank you very much. So what is the lasting impact of Indiana's support of the Texas election lawsuit? Our political experts weigh in next on All Indiana Politics. And welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome back Democrat Laura Beck and Republican Pete Seaton. Pete, we'll start with you. We'll talk about this Texas lawsuit. In your opinion, why would Indiana leaders, including the Attorney General, want to put their name on this? It's a lawsuit that a lot of legal scholars have been trashing.
Well, one, because they're hearing from their constituents. I've spoken to Republican House staff members. Their offices are being inundated with phone calls from Hoosier constituents demanding that they join this Texas lawsuit. But look, it was ultimately a foregone conclusion that the Supreme Court was going to be asked to weigh in on this. It is their job to adjudicate questions of constitutionality. And hopefully, regardless of what they decide, this will bring some clarity and closure to this election outcome.
So, Laura, I want to bring you in here real quick. Is this suit about, in your opinion, changing the outcome, appeasing the president, or allowing Donald Trump to raise a huge amount of money in his final weeks in office?
I think it's about all of those things, frankly. And there's a lot of things that can be said about this, and just how absolutely inappropriate it is. If you don't like the outcome of the election, you're just going to try and change the rules. What I find so disappointing, especially with these Indiana members of Congress who've signed on to this lawsuit, is that our own governor this week said Indiana is on fire. And people are really hurting in our state. They're unemployed. There's no federal money coming to us yet, right? Because there's been such an impasse over the stimulus. And rather than these folks actually do their jobs and focus on how they help people back home, they're playing these petty reindeer games that really just infuriate people. They embolden people, and they tear us apart at a time when our country really does need to come together.
In your opinion, Laura, are there long-term negative effects from this?
Well, I don't necessarily know if there'll be long-term negative effects from them politically, but what it does is it really permanently lumps them into this One America News, Max, QAnon group, where we just really don't trust facts. We don't trust truth. For example, if the Democrats did this, these legislators and these members of Congress would be screaming, they'd be up in arms. So it just sets some really dangerous precedents. And frankly, it doesn't really make them look that good.
Pete, same question.
Well, I find Laura's response hilarious because you've got the Washington Post and other national outlets literally chasing down members of the United States Senate and United States House of Representatives in the hallways of Congress to find out what they think about the latest tweet from the president, instead of focusing on the coronavirus aid package that we desperately need to get passed. So if we're going to use her example, I mean, let's look to Washington. Distractions are all they do in D.C., and that's why we can't get what we need done.
Well, Pete, let's...
But just going back to Pete's point, though, I mean, look, I think that Pete and I both could probably agree, frankly, the Democrats and the Republicans, and I'm saying the Democrats as well, they need to find a way to work with the Republicans to get this done. I don't necessarily think that we need to hunker back into our corners, but we've got to find some relief because these businesses, these local governments, people are really hurting, and we're going to see a lot of folks go out of business because they're just not going to be able to sustain this.
And you guys took the conversation there, so let's stay there for a moment. Who really is at fault here, Pete?
Well, I think both sides are trying to make the perfect the enemy of the good. There is a lot of agreement when it comes to coronavirus aid, particularly when it comes to relief for small businesses that are hurting. But you've got Democrats that want to bail out blue states that were already in financial trouble. And Republicans really want to see liability protections for businesses, schools, and universities. And those are the sticking points. So instead of focusing on where they agree, they're spending all their time on the sticking points, which is delaying what we need to happen.
30 seconds, Laura, your thoughts?
I think we need to figure something out. I mean, blaming things on blue states is silly because coronavirus is running rampant throughout the entire country. So that argument right now is a little bit moot. But at the same time, I do understand why people are worried about the liability insurance. But from the other perspective, I understand why folks want liability insurance. So we have to move away from this either or and find a way to get to all of the above. Because again, you've got people who can't pay their rent, can't pay their mortgages, and are going out of business.
Yeah, we'll have to leave it right there. Let's just get something done. Pete, Laura, always good to see you. Thank you. We'll be right back. Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics. A reminder, the Electoral College meets tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Indiana will cast its 11 votes for Donald Trump. You can watch it live on wishtv.com. And we'll be back here next weekend with Republican Party Chairman Kyle Hupfer. Have a great weekend.